So, with his current situation stuck on this planet, and having nothing but time on his hands while he tried to figure a way out of it, knowing that he had a very limited time frame before he suffocated, Delius also got used to trying to accelerate his meditation. It was something that he had already been working on whilst he was on the surface of the other planet, where it was first taught to him. The problem being that Delius's normal neurological makeup was still set for the original time frame that he came from. Through meditation, he found that he could accelerate this. The core would still remain the same. However, he could push more of his mind into a heightened or accelerated frame rate in the time-space continuum, making it match more closely with that of the rest of the universe, which was exceptionally difficult, but the only way that he could functionally achieve meditation. And so Delius began working with this much of his time, splitting it equally between the martial arts training that he continued and this meditation process. The person who taught the martial art to him spoke of the ability to see into oneself, to understand that all life has a flow, an energy that resides within it, that his body was in fact his, and that because it was his, he does have control of it, to a degree that most people never truly realize. His master even demonstrated this by stopping his own heartbeat, for several minutes in fact, before starting it back up again, all with sheer willpower, the desire to have control over one's own being. He stated that all functions of the body, as well as the energies that flow through it, are under your control, should you have the diligence to assert control over it. This takes time, focus, and patience, his teacher Bawa would claim. But Delius never quite mastered this, the temporal misalignment of his brain making it very difficult to meditate at all. But with nothing but time on his hands, he set about practicing, trying to get better at meditation, at seeing into himself. And after what amounted to probably another 6 months of hardened meditation and martial arts training on the surface of that planet, something new finally happened for Delius. For the first time, he felt as if he could feel something, a flow, an interior flow within him, his own energy. It took another 3 months after that for him to stably view this energy, to perceive it clearly, and be able to control seeing it at will. Afterwards, he was able to fully visualize this energy, as if he could leave himself, his body and state of being, and for short periods of time, see himself in the third person, and the massive amount of energy that his body was putting off. It flowed around him like a fire burning in an infinite array of shades and colors. It surged out from him in waves that seemed to ripple into everything. After another few months of training, he became capable of beginning to manipulate this energy. He could condense it down and force its fiery form to subside, concentrating it within his body, or even increase it, or force himself to produce more of it for short durations, as doing it for longer durations seemed to cause a strange itching sensation that wouldn't go away for some time. Whilst mastering this control over this energy that he seemed to possess, Delius found himself trying to find out what effect using this energy would have on his martial arts, and he found the results once again impressive. Delius was able to generate a force of this energy, an outflow, and then concentrate it into his strikes, which would create somewhat of a long-ranged impact force, which could strike into things at a distance, causing quite the spectacular explosion. There was no fire. It was as if whatever he struck it with was simply blown apart, as if he had physically punched it, simply without the punch itself. He also began to experiment with other aspects during his training. He found that by infusing his body with this energy in specific ways, he could actually enhance his already absurd physical strength and speed, finding that if he condensed the energy down within himself, then his speed became greater. Normally, it took him nearly 2 minutes to round the planet, making a full circle back to where he came from. That time was cut down to a fourth if he suffused himself with this energy. And as Delius continued to train, he noted that the energy itself seemed to accelerate as well, growing more bountiful as time passed. Finally, it had been approaching 2 years since Delius first got marooned on this planet, and at this point he seemed to have mastered all he could of this energy and was growing more weary of the tedium of training and meditation every day, making no more progress or strides, seeming to have reached a limitation for the time being, at least what he could achieve in the time that he had been given. But he doubted that if there was another wall, he had time to pass it. As time went on, his body was beginning to show the effects of the lack of oxygen. Once every few weeks, his body would begin to convulse, his chest trying to force itself to take in air that simply wasn't there, getting dizzy spells and other negative effects. It was clear that his time was running short. He had lasted this long, but he was running low on options. He needed to get off this planet. The only question was how. And though he had mulled it over countless times, there was only really one option that he could truly think of, and that was to jump. To make a single jump so hard that it would propel him off the planet. To be honest, Delius didn't know if he could manage such a thing. And then the infinite dangers beyond that were simply more added on top of it. That being that space is infinite. If he jumped off of the planet, if he was even able to achieve that absurd goal, then he would be catapulting himself into space. He had one and only one chance at it. He would have to aim for something and jump towards it with everything that he had. Once he left the planet, he would not be able to alter his direction. He would be on a straight line path. And if he missed, or if his jump was not powerful enough to truly carry him to the target, then he would simply end up floating in space. No more options, no more chances. In space, he would suffocate. So there was only going to be one opportunity at it. He had surmised that he could not jump back to his home planet, though he could see it in the distance. Unlike any of the other worlds, he doubted his physical constitution would save him there. The intense gravitational forces on his world would put him at a normal level with all other living beings there. He would not be able to survive the descent through the atmosphere, or the impact once he crossed over it. That's if he could survive it at all. There, his mortality was much more normal. His only option being to jump to a different planet, one with a sustainable atmosphere, but where the forces were tolerable enough that he could survive the landing without any sort of ship or brace. And truthfully, there was only one destination he truly wanted to reach. if it could not be his home world, it would be the one where he could find the people that sent him here, that betrayed his trust and left him to die. If he must risk his life, then at least he's going to risk it trying to find out why it is they thought he should die. So, Delius crouched down low, bending his legs, placing his hands on the ground beneath him. As he did his best to focus, he knew that applying energy to his body, focusing it and concentrating it, could generate more powerful results in terms of physical activity and effort. So, he did everything possible to focus every bit of energy he possibly could into his legs, powering them up, trying to force them to kick as hard as they possibly could, with every fiber of strength that he could possibly muster. This needed to work. There was only going to be one chance. If his kick was not strong enough to carry him to the planet, or he missed his target, he'd die long before being able to get help from anyone. Doing his best to concentrate the energy in his body into his legs, Delius looked up to the sky above him, that blank net of darkness and black filled with stars, seeing the tiny orb that was his target in the sky, picking out the single one that was the home world of those that stranded him here. His shot needed to be perfect. It had to hit. There was no other option. As the energy in his body began to focus down towards his legs, the earth and ground around him seemed to vibrate. He could see arcs of what looked like rainbow electricity that surged off of his body, digging their way into the earth and dirt around him. The earth itself shook and quaked as he crouched there, staring up at that orb in the sky. And with everything he had, Delius grit his teeth, clenched his fists, and forced himself off the surface of the planet with a massive jump, harder than he's ever jumped in his entire life. Beneath him, there was an absolutely massive detonation, an explosion that rocked the surface of the planet as Delius rocketed out into space, further and further away from the surface of the planet. More and more, the planet below him seemed to be distant, growing farther and farther away as Delius shot out into space. As Delius grew further away from the planet, he could see the point that he jumped from. From his perspective, this point high above the planet, it looked like a massive crater with a ring that seemed to be circulating out from it, a wave that seemed to be rippling across the surface of the planet as he rocketed out into space, further and further. At first, Delius had felt the effects of gravity. He could feel the planet pulling him back towards it. But in a very short time, that sensation faded away, and now it was all but gone, with Delius floating through the vacuum of space, or more like flying without any ability to adjust or change, simply soaring towards a destination, hoping to hit it, with no idea of whether he could or not. But if the force of his jump was not sufficient to reach his target, if it dwindled before he got there, then it would all be for naught, and Delius would die floating in space. The only question was it enough?